Okay, here we go on take 2 of my video. My son had to get a drink of water and he came in to do that. And I thought, well, you know, as much as it sort of frustrates me when he sees the doors closed and he knows that I'm doing something and he'll only have to wait 10 minutes, that's okay, we'll live with it and we'll just work with what we got. So I wanted to talk today about a subject that I think really needs to be addressed again. This is not the first time I've talked about it, and it's something that a lot of people have talked about just as well, and I think that many people have okay perspectives on it, but I want to add a few things that I think make sense. And this the subject of today's little video is that a fact, and it has to do with election integrity. This is the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. I'm your host. I'm Kurt. Today is Saturday, the 19th of June of 2021. Thank you for everybody who's here on Rumble, on the podcast, on YouTube. Thank you for coming along. Remember, Rumble is my preferred platform. If you choose to look at my videos, that's where I'd rather you look at it. But, you know, you're going to do it from wherever you happen to do it from, and I get that. And again, today's subject is that a fact? And I'm going to go ahead and go through my notes as I typically do. Typically, you're going to find that I do that pretty much every day, just so that you have some idea where I'm coming from, so that you have some idea whether or not the video makes sense for you to watch. Though I'll tell you that even if I don't mention it in my notes, you might find something in the video that does make it worth your time to watch it anyway. The video was the result of a guy that I periodically listen to. Sometimes I completely agree with, sometimes I partially agree with, and sometimes I totally disagree with on things that he does and says, and that's Tim Pool, and he was talking about the 2020 election and stating as more or less a fact that Joe Biden won that election. Let's be plain, at least for the time being, and maybe henceforth and from henceforth and forever, it can be argued that Joe Biden and those who supported him have won the day. I don't know how that's going to work. I think probably there's no mechanism, as Drew Berquist has said a time or two, really that's going to suffice to get Joe Biden out of office at this point, even if he was unfairly elected. So I don't think that that's probably going to happen. That doesn't mean people shouldn't be looking for and pointing out ways in which the fix was in, and I've got the fix was in quotes. Maybe Mr. Biden does a full term, maybe even 2. In my mind, that doesn't mean the 2020 elections were free and clear. We need to be constantly vigilant for election fraud. We must accept the possibility of its existence and work to purge it from our elective process. Not just the systems, the entire electoral process. Was the 2020 election free and fair? I'm not saying it was. I'm not saying it wasn't. What I am saying is, in my view, that remains to be seen. And maybe it never will be. Let's be fair. I know this, if you want people to trust the system, you must allow investigation and allow for transparency whenever anyone alleges fraud. In my personal opinion, we must work to make things so that's not a question in future as well. I don't care how hard it makes things. Whether we have to ditch computer counting or voting or whatever, we must do it. By the way, an inspection or investigation must be completed by those outside the system. That's not to say that the system can't have say in certain parts of the process, but their say should be limited to ensuring that the process is above board and very little else. Okay, so I'm done with my notes, so let's get on with it. On that last point, those doing the process of investigation must be above board. It's okay for them to say the process isn't complete, so you cannot argue that this or that happened at this point. We may bring certain facts to light, but how much those facts do or don't matter in the entire process, you can't say until the process is complete. But this idea I've heard, so I think it was Colorado saying, no outsider can audit an election. Rubbish. Not only can an outsider audit the election, they're pretty much the only ones who should be allowed to do so. Now again, everybody should be able to, just like in the election itself, see the process that's going on. And not necessarily every little piece of it, though. That's the more the better, right? Because then if there's something wrong with what's going on, they can point out, no, this is broken, here's how. Right? I'm going to say this again. I'm not convinced that the 2020 election was above board. On the other hand, I'm not convinced that I have sufficient information or knowledge to say that it wasn't either. This is why the audit, this is why the investigation is necessary in the first place, in my opinion. It isn't because we know there was fraud. It's because people have alleged it. And I want to point something out, and this is very, very important. If there's an election and a Republican wins, and they either squeak by or they win by an unreasonable landslide, where it doesn't look, they didn't look like they were going to be that popular, and suddenly everything in the world swelled, and somebody says, we need a recount, we need a validation, we need an investigation, we need a fraud investigation into this election, it must happen. I don't care if it's a Republican or a Democrat. It makes no difference at all. If you say, I have reason to believe there was fraud in this election, or I really think that it's probable that there was fraud in this election, that doesn't mean that people should assume that what you're saying is correct. If I think, I'll just tell you, I think that there was fraud in this last election. I think anybody who doesn't think there was fraud in this last election was kind of dopey. But let me just tell you something. I have a feeling you're going to go back quite a ways and find that there was fraud to some degree in every election. The question is, how significant was that fraud? Okay? So I'm not sitting here saying, whoa, all elections up to now have been pure as the driven snow. And I'm not, in fact, that's part of my point. Part of my point is, if they haven't been, hey, guess what? There should have been investigations into prior elections as well. And I'm not arguing against that. I'm not arguing against that. I'm not saying, in fact, I kind of think that there ought to be an audit process in place, again, where somebody outside the system is auditing the elections and is not, I won't say is not paid for it, but I will say that they don't get any more or any less based on the fact that they show that there is or isn't fraud in the election. It's just what it is. I think that there probably ought to be an audit process on every election, particularly presidential election, but on every election that occurs. And I'm going to say this again, too. Look, for I don't even know how long, we did elections in this country, and we did not have computers involved in those elections. Computers are a very recent addition to the elective process. I don't think we need computers, and being a computer person, it's my opinion that it's too easy to diddle the data if you've got them involved in the process. Further, I believe that all records with regards to election must be kept. And I'm totally okay with them being sealed until they're actually needed and then being broken open only for need and sealed again when it's done. And I think that they should be kept for a number of years, maybe for the entire term of the election, frankly. But the point is, I'm not a fan of this idea that we can just assume that there was no fraud because we don't want to believe that there's a possibility it happened. Fraud happened. I'm just going to tell you. This I say to unequivocally. Okay? Fraud happened. Fraud, I believe, has probably happened in every single election that we've ever had in this country for dog catcher up. I'm pretty sure fraud's happened. How serious was that fraud? How important was it that we look into that fraud? Well, the only way to find out is to audit the election and to see. It's the only way to find out. If we standardize a process where some outsider comes in and in a transparent way looks at the election, if we purge the elective process, the electoral process of all possible or of as many possible points of fraudulent activity as we're able. Obviously, we can't get them all. There's no way. But the more we can get, the more people can trust that their vote actually mattered. And this is important. We've already got other problems that I've talked about before. Things like the fact that two people tend to make it to the final process, right? The fact that only a Republican and a Democrat tend to be put on the ballot for the presidency, for example, most of the time. So if you're an outsider, you have to deal with that. Anyway, this is my opinion. Was there fraud in the 2020 election? Absolutely. How serious was the fraud? Have no idea. Do I think it affected the election and made it so that one candidate won over another when that shouldn't have happened? Have no idea. And I don't think anybody at this point really does. I think there are some people who've been doing some sort of stuff that sort of know. That said, I'm basically out of time, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap up. This is the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. I am your host. I am Kurt. Today is Saturday, the 19th of June of 2021. That means tomorrow will be Sunday, the 20th of June of 2021. Thank you for everybody who's been on Rumble, on the podcast, on YouTube. Again, Rumble is my preferred platform. Remember that you can give me a positive or a negative Rumble on Rumble if you choose to do so. That's usually a plus or a minus, though sometimes it's that boxing glove that you see typically on Android, at least in the top right corner of your screen. Remember also that you can give me a like or a don't like, dislike, whatever you want to call it. Thumbs up, thumbs down on YouTube if you happen to be looking at me there. Remember also that you can comment on either of those platforms. Today's subject has been, is that a fact? And tomorrow we're going to talk about trading in the unreasonable. And I think you'll find this an interesting thing. I try to make everything that I do interesting. Hope that you're having a good day today. Hope you're having a good Sabbath if you are a believer in keeping the Sabbath. Hope that things are going well for you, and hopefully we will see you again on Sunday's Daily Summation. The speaker on this edition of the Daily Summation is Kurt Schubert. This video is recorded on Saturday, the 19th of June of 2021. The Daily Summation is created for Kurt's Religion and Politics. Thanks for watching this edition of the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. I hope you found it entertaining or instructional, or maybe both. If you want to see more from me, you can go to blogs.kpschubert.com. That's blogs.kpschubert.com. I am on Twitter, Parler, and Minds.com. My handle on each of those is @kpschubert. That's @kpschubert. I have a Rumble and a YouTube channel. They are the Kurt's Religion and Politics channels on Rumble and YouTube. I have a Facebook page. The Facebook page is Kurt's Religion and Politics as well. I am on Patreon. If you want to support me, that's one of the better places you can do that. And you will find me at Kurt's Religion and Politics on Patreon. I have a podcast. The podcast is podcasts with an S, .kpschubert.com. That's podcasts.kpschubert.com. I think you should be able to find me with relative ease on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify as well. The best way I find to do that is to look for Kurt's Religion and Politics. You can try to use the Daily Summation. I find that it doesn't work as well as a general rule, but you can always try that. I'm glad to have you aboard today, and hopefully we will see you again tomorrow.